Hi everybody, Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological channel, and this is the special annual blog for looking at the full year ahead, 2024. And when I do this blog every year, I'm only looking at major shifts in the outer planets because they color not only sometimes a full year, but literally for years and years ahead. And that's what we have going on this year in 2024. We have a massive shift with Pluto going into Aquarius for the next 20 years. So that's what most of this blog is going to be about today. And it's pretty important when you think the next 20 years of your life. Pluto is going to be going through Aquarius, and that background energy is going to be there. So it's really going to be a good energy to know that's what's going on, so that we can move with the times, so to speak. Pluto, being an outer planet, influences us very much through the collective, through society, through levels of depth like that, rather than just as an individual. So anyway, the Astrological Wings channel is a free blog that I do actually weekly, usually, and do a weekly report, and you can access that on YouTube. If you have a YouTube account, you can become a follower even, and you'll know whenever I post a blog. I also have it accessible through my website, which is www.astrologicalwings, and that's all one word.com. I'll put the channel after that. The Astrological Wings channel is just on YouTube and the podcast, so it's astrologicalwings.com, and you can find the link there. You can also find it on podcasts by looking up Astrological Wings channel on your favorite podcast. I also put the link on Instagram. Astrological Wings has its own Instagram page, where I put various things during the week that I don't cover in my weekly blog. So if you have an Instagram account, you might want to check that stuff out too. It's always just in comment form, not video or audio, so it only takes a few seconds really to read what I post there. And also post the link on Facebook, and you need to private friend me there. That's Matthew with 2 T's and then Lawton, Lauten. And this is a free service that I offer, so my request is that you pass the link along. And this is a big one, so if you think that anyone you know might be interested in hearing about the Pluto and Aquarius, please pass it along. And all kinds of other information on my website. If you'd like to get some kind of professional reading, all that information is there. And my email, if you'd like to contact me, is matthv823@gmail.com. There's also an email set up on the website you can get me at. Okay, so big thing. January 20th this year, Pluto goes into Aquarius. Now, it did go into Aquarius briefly last year for about 10 weeks, and it gave us a little taste of what it was like, but returned to Capricorn, and then went direct back on October 12th at the end of Capricorn, and has now finally gone into, or will be going into Aquarius pretty much for good. It will go back into Capricorn during one 10-week period later in the year, which just so happens to be right when the United States election for the next presidential election is setting up something very similar to what happened last time in the election. But anyway, so did a lot of research on this. Gonna look at my notes a little bit here and there for you guys. But so Pluto going into Aquarius January 20th, 2024, and will stay there basically until January 20th of 2044, except for those 10 weeks in September, October, November later this year. The rest of these 20 years is Pluto in Aquarius. And let's just talk about Pluto a little bit first, okay? And remember, if you're not an astrologer or know astrology well, listen to just what the energy represents of this stuff, and you don't really need to get caught up on the astrological terms. So Pluto was discovered in 1930. Okay, it was right around the time when plutonium was also being used as a discovery to make what? Atomic weaponry, right? So, one of the things astrologers have always noticed is that when a new planet or body is discovered, many times the energy of that planet or body is very congruent with what was going on in the times of humanity's history at the time. So that's why I'm wanting really stress this for a couple minutes here. Pluto discovered in 1930 what was going on in the world back then, and Pluto happened to be in Cancer when it was discovered. And what did Pluto just get out of? Capricorn, right? Very similar to Cancer, the opposite sign of Cancer in the zodiac. So they're tied together on one axis together, right? So very similar times that we've just gone through in the last 16 years that were kind of very similar to what was going on in the late 20s and 1930s when Pluto was first discovered in Cancer. So that's something that I'm going to hammer home a point about just about now. Just remember what was happening in the 1930s, that fascism was kind of taking control of society through strong governments, strong leaders who were using their authority and power to push their populations to doing really what they wanted, and doing that in very violent ways, in warlike ways, by creating enemies, by basically using patriotism, right? Cancer is the sign that's most related to patriotism, right? It's all about home and heritage and family, and that's what patriotism is on a collective or national level. So Pluto has a lot to do with patriotism, and Cancer has a lot to do with patriotism, which means that also Capricorn can have a lot to do with patriotism. And what happens in times when there's crisis, which there was back then, there was depression, and there's been a lot of crisis lately, too, in the last 15 years, between different political belief systems, things like that going on, is that leaders use that time of crisis to create an enemy, to play into that patriotism that Pluto represents, create an us versus them mentality, right? And so that was the energy that Pluto was discovered under, okay? And patriotism was used and is still used right now to this day. Today, it's being used in several parts of the world as an excuse by the leaders and their population, who they've convinced to go along with them at this point, for murder, war, and violence, for literally genocide at times. To create an enemy is what patriotism needs. It needs to be fed, that energy, especially when there's a crisis. Because Pluto, as I've said before, it exposes the shadow side of whatever's going on in that sign. And in Capricorn, the last 16 years, that's been the shadow side of those in power, those who have authority, those who pull the patriot card when they want others to go along with them, right? So this is something that's really interesting, though. What happened in some of those situations when Pluto was discovered? Prior to that, humans have a need to group together, right? There's an innate need to have relationship, and there's been safety always in groups, right? You know, the individual is a lot safer in a group than they are by themselves, especially in times of crisis. And what Pluto taught us when it was discovered during that time of crisis is that safety no longer came in groups, that blind patriotism, blind idealism brought to you by someone who's a leader of a large group, society, a civilization, and is creating an enemy in a time of crisis could be the road to your individual destruction. Okay? That's what Pluto was teaching us back then. That the individual no longer was safe by belonging to some group. An atomic bomb could blow the whole group up, right? There was no longer safety there. In fact, what it was showing us, that in order to transform, we have to take our power back. We can't blindly follow some group or leader and assume our safety and survival will get through that. If anything, blindly doing that is the path of our own destruction. So this was the energy that Pluto was discovered under. And we were forced to choose a side. Does this sound familiar now? You know, since the age Pluto went into Capricorn, in the beginning it was Occupy versus Tea Party. Now it's just pretty much dissolved into left versus right, or Democrat versus Republican in the U.S., but it's this extreme us versus them, and you have to choose a side. You don't get to be free. One of the other things that's really to make an impression on with that Pluto is the use of technology for the means of using violence and destruction and war against that assumed them or enemy. So this was really, you know, the bombs that were made by technology that really, once again, imprinted Pluto with this very destructive energy. Okay? So that's the big lesson that Pluto is teaching people on an individual level. Transform. Take your power back. If you're going to be blindly driven by society or the group or even your subconscious, it could be the path to hell for you. It most likely will be. And it's very interesting when you think about the next sign that Pluto went into after Pluto in Cancer was Pluto in Leo. The me generation. The complete opposite of that Pluto in Cancer, submitting to a group, and the patriotism of a group. And saying, no, me first. I come first, right? And then even when you think about that, then Pluto goes into Virgo around 1960. The group comes back, but it's a group that's more into finding support, helping the earth, helping self-healing, and taking care of ourselves materialistically instead of allowing the government or some bigger corporation or something to take care of our needs. Once again, we're learning. We can't rely on them, right? So notice how the signs even continue to tell the story of Pluto's discovery and the energy that was behind it. So remember, the key points here is Pluto represents a projection of a shadow onto a group. And if you join that group, you could be treading the path of your own destruction within that. Okay? But what Pluto is also showing us is that life and death are part of the same process. And that rebirth can occur. Pluto's all about rising from those ashes and coming back out of that. Pluto is like represented by the color black. And the color black consumes all time. Right? It's timeless. It's not bound in. Pluto also represents karma, the law of life. It's not punishment. Karma is not punishment. It's a law of life. It's cause and effect. It's action and reaction. And that's what Pluto is trying to teach us. We have to take responsibility, or we're going to get swept along by the tides of time. That your karma will be affected by a group that you belong to. So Pluto, keywords now, one more time. Transformation or irrevocable changes. The cycle of life. Birth, death, rebirth. Power and authority. War and death and destruction. Subconscious motivation. Why? Because the subconscious is tied to karma, and karma is tied to past lives. And those past lives are what is your subconscious. So it's tied in to the subconscious motivation of your mind, things that you blindly are doing every day if you haven't looked into it yourself. Propaganda, coercion. The us versus them mentality. Condoning the hero and vilifying the villain. And the hero and the villain can be the same being or entity. Hero at the beginning, villain at the end. Pluto cycle. Okay? Now let's talk about Aquarius just briefly for a minute. What is Aquarius? It's a fixed air sign. It's all about knowledge. Knowledge that's been established. And communicating that knowledge, air, communication, talking about it, sharing it. In Aquarius, with groups that you belong to because you have the same ideals, the same views, and they're dogmatic. Aquarius is a dogmatic sign, whether you guys want to believe it or not, you Aquarians. You're extremely dogmatic, stubborn, right? Stuck on your ideals. Find out new information and knowledge, question it at first, then find the kernel that you want in it, adopt it, take it into your own, upgrade your system, upgrade all the systems around you. That's Aquarius, right? It's also about what we perceive as being what's fair or equal or just in society. And believe me, there's a lot of different viewpoints to that. But we gravitate towards, people who have that similar ideology than us. So stubborn, logical, very inventive, not emotional. Emotions get in the way, distract you. So this is the Aquarian energy combining now with that Pluto that I just talked about, and a mundane astrology, which is the astrology of the world's events, and the leaders of the world, and the people of the world, which you are part of if you're listening to this blog, most likely anyway, is that Pluto always shows the ugly underbelly or shadow side of the sign that it's going into, right? In Aquarius, it's going to show all this stuff that's based on intellect, information, which these days is technology and science, basically. It's going to show how those who have that power in those areas, technology and science, what negative shadow side that's bringing us. And we have a great example. Like I said, we had that 10 weeks last fall when Pluto did go into Aquarius. And what happened during those weeks? That was when all those guys who were working on the AIs, whoa, time out. This could actually be dangerous to the continuation of humanity as we know it, to allow AI to go too far. The road of our own destruction, right? The road of our own destruction as a group. Right there. Gave us a little taste of what can happen during these next 20 years if we allow technology's shadow side to get out of control. Could lead us to the path of our own destruction. And there's some leaders who are already creating that Pluto thing with technology, aren't they? The us versus them mentality, right? You see it out there. It's already been going on. So this is something that, we're going to have to really see through the next 20 years. There's going to be great scientific advances. This cell phone that we have now is going to probably be so like an ancient tool in 20 years. Like, there are going to be incredible advances in these next years. And those in science and technology are going to rule and have the power in this world. But we're also, just like when Pluto went through Capricorn, we're going to see how we saw the government and corporate leaders and bank and financial people were not really, there was an ugly shadow side to all them. That's what we're going to see with the technology too. And of course, we're already seeing a lot of that, how they can control through social media and stuff what actually is, being put out there, those kind of things. But it's going to also be a time when there'll be great social movements. There may be two opposing social movements. There may be a peace movement versus a movement of fascism. You take a look around the world right now. There are populations right now who are stuck in that Pluto and Capricorn thing, where their leaders have taken them to a place where they're in a war, and and they've been dragged into it. They don't have a choice. They had to choose a side, right? And like I said, that's the kind of energy that Pluto will bring up, So we're going to get to see a lot of that stuff, We're going to get to see where the ugly side of that stuff comes. But remember now, intellect is going to have the greatest value. This is where we're going to really look at things, and emotions and stuff are really going to be played down. They're going to be seen as something that, is actually just, not a good thing. And so think about all this stuff, once again, that Aquarius energy is going to come in and make people very stubborn in these social movements about what they believe in. Do we have stuff like that going on right now? Absolutely. We're already seeing a lot of this stuff, and here's some of this stuff, here's a few historical things just from the last 2 or 3 times that Pluto went through Aquarius. Because remember, this is once, it happens only once every 225 years that Pluto goes through Aquarius. So the last time was 1777 through 1798. And what was that? It was a time of political revolution in the United States, in France, also like Caucasus, Belgium, Haiti, Australia, Brazil, Ireland. There were revolutions going on all over the world at that time against those who were in power. So Aquarius is a very revolutionary sign. Once again, trying to push its agenda. It really wants. And back then too, 1777 to 1798. Let's talk about the technology side. Air sign, right? The first hot air balloons were used back then. Okay, it was also the time when slavery was starting to be questioned. It was when Freetown was first established by ex-British slaves, where already Britain was giving away. It was like, okay, this doesn't really fit in. Declaration of Independence, right? Constitution, U.S. Constitution, and the Declaration of the Rights of Man, all during that time. And there was a lot of treaties too. If you look in that 20-year period, a lot of negotiating of treaties trying to get more equality and justice for the people in those. It was also the discovery of the use and discovery or the implementing of the metric system. So once again, something very mathematical, technical, scientific. It gets the whole group to come together, right? It was also the time when classical music reached a popularity point. And what's classical in music? Music, especially classical music, based on all these mathematical, types of equations in a way, right? So like all very Aquarian type things. So you can see how in those almost 20 years it affected. Then the time before that is incredible. 1532 to 53, to me, the single greatest discovery of the age of Pisces, the single biggest event of the last 2,000 years that's changed the human psyche more than anything else, and the way we perceive the world, happened when Pluto was in Aquarius. And that was when Copernicus discovered that the Earth was actually revolving around the sun, that it wasn't the center of the solar system or universe. Do you know how mind-boggling that was to people then? It was like never even a concept prior to that. It literally changed the whole world. It literally, in a way, was the first little twilight of the dawn of the age of Aquarius, 500 years or 400 years before it actually occurred. It was like when science first made a discovery that in the age of Pisces, through the leadership then, religion, specifically the church, into a frenzy, into something that was not even thought possible. It was literally the single biggest discovery of the last 2,000 years, guys. It really was. It shifted our whole reality. Just think about it. So that happened in that time, in the 1532 to 53. It was also the time when the Protestants broke from the church, right after Martin Luther, in the age of the Pluto Capricorn age, had nailed his proclamation to the wall. The reaction to that, but when Pluto went to Aquarius, was the Protestants breaking from the church in every direction. So once again, you can see, feeling like there's not equality, feeling another social movement, changing the whole history. So this is the kind of stuff we could be in for the next 20 years. Some really massive social changes. It was also the time that the Jesuits formed within the Catholic Church, and they're all known as a very revolutionary group within the church itself. It was also the time when firearms were first used in battle in China. So even the technology of war, once again, goes all the way back to that Pluto. And then even the one before that, from 1286 to 1308, was the first time the Scottish people went in revolution against the English. So there's that revolution again. And that was when the Pope had to leave Rome because there was such a big schism in the church that there were two popes going on, one in Rome and one in France. So you can, once again, you can see the energy here, you guys, of how, this is happening. So what is Pluto and Capricorn exposed? Once again, it exposed how our leadership in any hierarchical system, corporations, in finance, governments, church still, religion still, that there's ugly stuff going on with those authorities, right? And now what is this age is going to react to that. The Pluto and Aquarius age is going to want to remedy those situations. And so far, we're going to see different groups try to break that down and bring that equality in. So a lot there, but that's what we can really expect. an age of science and technology that's both good and bad. An age when those who are in those fields are in power, good and bad, right? An age where social movements are going to try to bring equality to the people, but there may be different ways of seeing that and very stubborn battles over it. And that means we could fall into those things of Pluto, death, destruction, violence, but it's all about transformation, and it's all about us each recognizing individually, again, not to allow a group to take your life down the path of destruction, to transform and take your power back, and then find those groups that you feel are working towards what you really feel is the right justice. But if you're going on blind faith and you're not, looking at yourself and that energy, you can easily be misled. Whole countries, whole populations happen over and over in history. It can happen again. And just two other things I want to mention really briefly. I've gone way over already. On April 9th, Jupiter conjuncts Uranus in Taurus. So this is pretty interesting because it'll bring a lot of sudden opportunities to change static situations in how we deal with resources, money, and assets. So you can see how that even fits in with the Pluto and Aquarius. This is like individuals being freed from responsibility in many ways, in old ways, but then also getting that freedom to be able to act out and propel forward in new ways and find new ways of doing that. It was also, once again, a sign of great social change, restlessness, wanting change, wanting more freedom. Also, I would say situations like being shocked once again by law, by the judicial system, which is Jupiter, and being too stuck in traditional, maybe wanting to break free of that. I've said before, that's definitely a type of energy that's been very prevalent in the last few years. And then also at the same time, Chiron is conjunct in the North Node, which to me is showing, yes, groups can hurt us. Once again, they can be the ones that are hurting us. And then shortly thereafter, in May, Jupiter will go into Gemini for the rest of 2024. And this is when, really it's a year, Jupiter brings expansion, brings personal growth and stuff. And it's a great year to educate yourself. It's a year if you need to learn something or learn more. It is a year to do that. It is a very intellectually based year again, too. It'll feed right into that air energy and discount a lot of emotional type stuff. It's a year of a lot of communications, and I think as far as the markets and stuff, communication industry, education industry, travel industry will be places where you'll probably see some growth happening in the market. So I don't want to get too far into that. I will definitely talk about that. And I also think about Jupiter and Gemini, that there may be advances, a lot of new advances and stuff in mental health and stuff. That should be really interesting. And then values that are shifting, being discussed a lot socially within society. All right, this is Matt Lund. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I'm going to wrap this up. This is a free blog I've been giving for many years, actually video on YouTube now for several years, podcast before that, written before that. Please pass it forward. It's a free, I do this for you guys, and I really would appreciate if you could pass it forward. This is important stuff for people to know. Check out my website, www.astrologicalwinds, no channel, astrologicalwinds.com. And that gives you all my contact info. Please support me if you need a reading. I'm a professional astrologer. I've been doing it for over 20 years. All the information is on the web there. Get in touch with me if you need to. An email is matthe823@gmail.com. Well, we live in interesting times, so let's all make sure that we're, stay on top. of this technology that's going to be coming at us, and hold our leaders accountable, and make sure that if we're not feeling something's not right for us, that we don't just blindly go along with the herd, because that's what most people are doing, because that could be the path of your total destruction. And rather, what we want to do is rise from the ashes like a phoenix and find the unique individual we are. We can transform ourselves, then we can transform groups around us, we can transform the world. All right, this is Matt Lawton. I will see you guys next week for the weekly report, and we will be getting we should be getting a new moon in Cap next week, I would think, right? So, all right, so we'll look forward to that, and I'll see you all then. Happy 2024.